They give us food that Eshok can't eat to make him a threat. They give us a door that we can't open until the four of us cooperate while you observe our reactions. Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Allegiance, which is episode 18 of season 3 of Star Trek Next Generation. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek Next Generation, one episode at a time. In this video, I cover the episode Allegiance. So Allegiance is the episode where Picard is abducted by aliens that refuse to reveal themselves. He finds himself trapped in a room with 3 other aliens with no idea how or why he got there. In the meanwhile, these aliens replaced Picard with a replicant of him that is acting weird and strange, drinking songs and hitting on a crusher, and then taking the Enterprise into a pulsar where it's about to destroy it. However, Riker does intervene and relieves him of duty. In the meanwhile, Picard figures out that one of the people with him is actually an alien, that the whole thing is an experiment to study different types of authority. But when Picard exposes them, the aliens take him back to his ship and they talk about how they were just running the experiment, but Picard then captures them in a force field to give them a taste of their own medicine, which they are horrified by, and Picard then warns them not to interfere with them again because they now know how to capture them. So, I always liked this episode. This was always a favorite of mine. I used to watch this a lot. I used to quote that thing. I did it in the preamble. Well, me and my sister, we used to quote that a lot to each other growing up. And yeah, I just watched a couple reviews for this episode, and they were all kind of negative-ish. One was a bit more positive, but it seems like people weren't that heavy on this episode. I believe, if I'm not too mistaken, my sister had this in her top 100 and called this one of the most underrated episodes of the show, if I'm not too mistaken. I don't know if I would go that far. I'm not sure. Maybe I would, maybe I wouldn't. But, well, it wasn't in my overrated list, at least not my top 10 anyway. But, or underrated, sorry, is what I meant to say. Obviously underrated. But anyway, this is still a really good episode. Like, I do think it is a bit underrated, and I always really liked it. It's one I always got enjoyment from. So, a couple of interesting avenues to go from. I want to cover the Picard replicant, the fake Picard that's on the Enterprise first, because this storyline was actually kind of funny. It was kind of fun. Like, I enjoyed it. It was interesting. And I just, listened to someone else saying, oh, it didn't make any sense why the alien was doing this. If the alien really wanted to study, human behavior or how they react to authority figures, that he should have just sat by and did nothing. And I completely and utterly disagree. I get what he was doing. It actually made perfect sense. In fact, every time he did something, I was tracking it, because what he was basically doing, and this makes sense if his purpose is to study and examine the how authority is practiced in the society, because they have no concept of it. And Picard is the captain of the ship, so his authority is absolute, and everyone is sworn under him, and they're sworn to obey him. And so he's doing everything to sort of push the limits, to test this. Like, he takes them to this pulsar for no good goddamn reason. He cancels the thing to test to see how how much he can push things. And he goes to Riker and says, is this at first, at the very start of the episode, he's like, look, I'm going to need your trust here. While I take you in this mission, I can't reveal everything. And Riker's like, of course, Captain. So he's sort of testing to see how much Riker would blindly follow Picard without knowing what was going on. And then when he goes to the poker game, he's just acting a bit bizarre. I think that's partly because he doesn't really, it's a fake Picard, and he doesn't really know how Picard would react. And he does the thing with Troy. He, gets in a corner and asks her, could you let me know if the crew starts to doubt me? Because again, he's wondering like how much the crew trusts him or his authority, because this is again a new concept for him. And then he does go to the pulsar and does the ultimate test. Will they blindly just let follow him to their deaths? Is there belief in an authority figure so absolute that they're willing to just blindly go follow him, even though it means their deaths? And when Riker is speaks out against that and says, look, I'll relieve you of duty if you put us in danger, he threatens to relieve him of duty to see how absolute his authority is. Can he actually override his first officer and relieve him of duty, even though he's trying to kill them all and his crew has no reason to believe him? So I actually totally buy that. I think it makes perfect sense. I think it's very fascinating, very interesting. And but the one argument I did hear, and this is true, but I don't necessarily see this as a plot hole, this is just what the alien decided to do, is by ordering the Enterprise to go to the star, lethal distance to the star, which would literally kill everyone, he's forcing one of two outcomes. In either outcome, he would not be able to continue this experiment as Picard. So the two outcomes is either one, they blindly follow him and they all die, or two, they relieve him of duty and expose him as a fraud. And either way, he's not able to continue the experiment. But here's what I'm thinking. Here's my headcanon around that. And it's not really, I don't even know if I call it a headcanon. It's more of a logical explanation. Is that his experiment's done. He gathered all the information that he wanted to have, and he pushed the limits to as much as he could. So he's reached a conclusion to his experiment. So now he wants to get to the point where he wants to do the final test, and this would be his last test. So I suspect that if, in the episode the real Picard comes back with the aliens because he exposed them, but I suspect that had he not exposed them, the alien would have left anyway. This was the conclusion of his experiments. Either he was going to be relieved of duty, in which case he's not going to be able to study authority figures anymore, so he's not going to, the experiment will be useless, or they're all going to die. So I have a feeling had Picard not come back with the other alien, the guy would have exposed himself as an alien and simply left. Or maybe not even exposed himself to the crew, maybe just left. By when they throw him in the brig and no one else is around, he would just disappear, as we see these aliens were, because I think his time was already utilized, and there was no more point of him staying there. Now, as far as him singing drinking songs and showing up to poker and hitting on Beverly, I heard an interesting theory about this, which I hadn't actually considered this before, but once I heard it, it made total sense. That when the alien duplicated Picard or impersonated Picard, he somehow had access to all Picard's memories and feelings, which would make sense because he would need that in order to imitate Picard, which he does actually do fairly well. But the things like singing the drinking songs and hitting on Beverly was things that Picard secretly wanted to do but never would do. It's like thoughts that entered his mind. Like everyone has like these stray thoughts that they don't act on, because of course they wouldn't do that. So Picard wouldn't go up and start singing drinking songs. He's too dignified to do that. But maybe the thought had occurred to him. Maybe he had stray thoughts about, ooh, wouldn't that be fun? And of course, as is established later in season 7, he does have underlying feelings, romantic feelings for Beverly that was also hinted at previously in season 1. Anyway, and so those were feelings that he's keeping hidden and wouldn't want to act on. But this version of Picard doesn't give a shit, doesn't have those inhibitions, and kind of wants to just push those limits and thinking, why not? Why not just hang out at the poker game? Why not just go to Tinford and start drinking songs? And why not go out and hit on Beverly? But the way that he didn't go all the way with Beverly. He was hinting at something romantic, kissed her, and then like, oh, I'm bushed, go, and practically shoved her out the door. And I think in that way he was kind of testing her reaction, probably to see how. And it's also sort of testing how someone in authority over someone else could have a personal relationship and what the limits with that. In fact, Beverly even says in the scene, oh, Jean-Luc, it feels like if I didn't know any better, I'd feel like you're playing games with me. And he was, because it's not actually Jean-Luc. It's a stupid alien, and he totally was playing games with her, but he was running this experiment and testing how far he could push things. So again, I love that. I think that was really good. Now, talking about Beverly and Jean-Luc, because this is the episode I've been waiting for, because I've been hinting at this, or I've referenced it in a couple season 1 episodes like The Naked Now and The Arsenal Freedom, when they start to hint at a Beverly and Jean-Luc relationship, which, as we know, never came to fruition. So Arsenal of Freedom was the last time this was really hinted at, and as I mentioned in my review for that episode, that they would bring it up again in this episode, Allegiance. But after this, they would promptly drop it, not really address it again until all the way in season 7. By memory, they might hint at it slightly, but they don't really get into it like they do in this episode. Now, I heard somewhere, and I don't know how true this is, but that it was a decree up from on high. I don't know if it was Gene Roddenberry or Rick Berman or both, or maybe it was even Michael Piller, but there was some decree that let's not do the Picard Crusher romance. On second thought, let's not go there. 'Tis a silly place. And so they decided it was forbidden or whatever. And I think the reason why they got away with it in this episode is because it wasn't really Picard. It was a fake Picard. And then by the time we get to season 7, they probably loosened up on that. And like, I don't care, whatever, go ahead and do it. which is my guess to why this isn't touched on until all the way in season 7. Now, it was clear that originally that's what they were setting up for in season 1. I do believe it was in the Arsenal of Freedom towards the end of season 1 that this decree was made. And that, oh yeah, let's actually not do this, Beverly and Jean-Luc romance, because they wanted Jean-Luc to be free to have the romance of the week, which I think is fucking stupid. Honestly, I think they should have just explored this, Beverly and Jean-Luc relationship. Oh yeah, they did. They touched on it. Actually, I'm thinking now in the episode Lessons, they touched on it because she was actually being jealous when Jean-Luc was having a little romance, which felt out of place. Also, we'll always have Paris at the end of season 1. She was being jealous there, which also felt out of place. I don't even realize how many times I had her being jealous. I think that's stupid. Like they don't even show that they're in the romance, and here she makes it clear that she just want to be friends. So why would she be jealous? But anyway, and maybe I think she was totally cool with Vash though. She was actually like really cool with her when she came on board in season 4 by memory. Anyway, point is they don't really explore it until season 7. So, as I said, I think they got away with it in this episode because it was fake Picard, but I like the theory that this is what Picard actually wanted to do, like secretly, but didn't want to act on it. And that's why this fake version of Picard was doing that. And I found that scene very interesting. And you could tell that there was definitely something there for Beverly, that she actually, even though she was saying that she just wanted to be friends, it was obvious that she did have deeper feelings for him. Particularly, like, she seemed to really be into that kiss, for example, and she was weirded out by the fact Picard just kind of pushed her out the door. I think she was actually expecting to get intimate with Jean-Luc, and I think she would have been all for it, actually. That's just my guess. But what the hell do I know? But anyway, that's what it appeared to be on screen. But then, of course, it wasn't really Jean-Luc. It was this alien who was just fucking with her. And toying with her, I should say. Be more accurate and more clear on what I mean. Toying with her and playing games with her, as she said, and so just pushes her out the door. So, but yeah, I found that interesting that this episode heavily hints at that there is something there, and there is something between them, and then whoop, right after this episode, completely forgotten, other than a few drops, like as I said, of her being a little bit jealous, which isn't until like season 6, and it's not until season 7 where they fully confront their feelings for each other in the episode Attached. And then in the episode All Good Things, we see this possible future where they had been married and already divorced. And of course, spoilers for Picard season 3. This is your chance to skip ahead or whatever if you haven't seen Picard season 3. They actually do hook up, apparently sometime after the movie Nemesis, and they have a kid, and Beverly runs away and doesn't tell Picard about the kid until 20 some odd years later when the kid's a grown man. So that's interesting. They actually finally do follow up, and I think it was right of them. That's why I didn't mind that storyline in Picard season 3, because it makes sense, because they often hinted at that there was something there between Beverly and Jean-Luc, and I really wish that they would have had the cojones to actually just follow through with it. I think later series, maybe not Voyager because they were checking shit in Voyager, but they wouldn't put people together unless they had no chemistry, like B'Elanna and Paris and Chakotay and 7 of 9, and not do the ones that have chemistry, like the Doctor and 7 of 9, or B'Elanna and Harry Kim. But anyway, sorry, I gotta bitch about that every chance I get. That's just another topic entirely, totally off topic. Point is, I wish they would have actually done something with these characters, and this episode kind of teases me with that, but they didn't actually do it, which is a shame. It is a shame. Anyway, so let's get to the held captive storyline. I think that... So it's interesting that this This episode, along with The Offspring, were sort of the bottle shows. And to make up for yesterday's Enterprise, which had a huge budget, and Sins of the Father was kind of costly itself with all these, elaborate sets and whatnot. But it's mainly yesterday's Enterprise. And before yesterday's Enterprise was The Matter Perspective, which was another bottle show. So they had to do all these bottle shows to make up for all the budget that they spent on yesterday's Enterprise, which is fine by me. I think bottle shows can be just as good, if not better sometimes, honestly, than the ones that they spend the money on. I think this is a pretty damn good episode personally, and I love The Offspring. I think that's one of the best episodes of the entire show. So, nothing against bottle shows. Bottle shows can be great too. So anyway, yeah, because this was all taking place on existing sets on the Enterprise, except for this one set, and half the episode takes place in this one room. So it's a very sort of one room drama, which I like. I like this kind of thing, and I thought this worked out very well. I think the aliens that they present here are very interesting. They weren't really explored in depth after this episode, which is a shame. They did appear, and I will touch on that, but we didn't really get any in-depth exploration of these aliens. You got the Miserian, who were peaceful to a fault, where they just been conquered 12 times because they never put up a fight. And I find that totally believable. It kind of reminds me of the Hawkins from Mirror Mirror episode, where they were like willing to die to not let their technology fall in the hands. Well, these guys are a bit different. They're like, I don't give a shit. I just want to think and do my own things. If you want to come and conquer us, whatever, we too busy to fight or whatever. And then the Chalmeth, which, again, you could say it's kind of repetitive with the Klingons and all these sort of fighting races, but it's very different than the Klingons, because the Klingons is an empire with, feudal Japan, as I said, type structures of houses and ruling houses, where the Chalmeth is like just total and complete anarchy. That there's no government and no laws, just people, warriors just going around killing each other and making their own laws, which I think is a very interesting concept, and I would have liked to seen that explored a bit more. And then we also get the Bolian, and this is the second appearance of the Bolian. The first appearance of the Bolian was in Conspiracy. And I think they were, at this stage, they weren't even referred to as Bolians. They were just Bolinars or something. And this is from Bolix 9 in this episode. And she has hair. And I think it had been firmly established after this episode that Bolians do not have hair. But, you could make some in-canon BS excuses of why she has hair. Maybe she genetically engineered it. Maybe she's wearing a wig in order to fit in more. Or maybe there's a weird hybrid type of Bolian that's just a different kind of Bolian. Or maybe she's half human, half Bolian. Or maybe this was just a fucking production thing before they decided Bolians didn't have hair. And that's the answer I'm going with. I hate all the in-the-universe. But, if you're welcome to headcanon any in-the-universe explanation you want. I prefer the out-of-universe. The real explanation is they didn't figure out that the Bolians weren't going to have hair yet. And so they gave her hair, and then they realized, hey, actually, on second thought, let's give the Bolians, let's make them all bald. Whatever, that's fine. And as far as I know, they're all bald. I don't know if I'm forgetting any example. I think there was an example that they showed on Deep Space Nine that had a Bolian in the background who was putting on a wig, if I remember. I don't know. It's just my memory. I could be totally wrong. But anyway, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there are some Bolians with hair, but I don't know. As far as I know, they don't have hair. And they look a little bit different here and also in conspiracy than they would, because going forward they would just be straight up like blue guys. And they didn't really explore them enough. They could always explore Bolians and Modern Track more. That's, a little hint there for you writers of Modern Track anyway, because I know you watch my YouTube channel. Yeah, right. Anyway, so yeah, that would, so that would be interesting if Modern Track explored Bolians more. So anyway, so you had those aliens. And of course, it's not really a Bolian. It's actually one of those aliens pretending to be a Bolian, but for argument's sake, it's pretending to be a Bolian. But anyway, here's the real question. Now getting super serious now and getting into the nitty-gritty of this episode. Here's the real question I asked myself while I was watching this episode. When Picard was trying to deal with the Chalmith warrior, Isak, and when Isak was threatening to kill the Myzarian and he was being very hostile, here's the real question. Why didn't Picard put on a Mark Twain outfit and go, I do declare? Sorry. Well, I say. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, then you probably hadn't seen Lower Decks, or maybe you had seen it, just didn't realize it was the same alien that was in this episode. But yeah, the episode of there's an episode of Lower Decks where they bring, and I believe that's the first time they bring back this alien, the Conleth, and we actually see him with the spaceship, and it hadn't really been established in this episode that they have spaceships. I mean, it hadn't been established that they don't, so it's not contradicting anything, but we just didn't know that one way or another. But anyway, in that episode, that alien's being hostile, and Boimler and Rutherford, they made peace with each other by dressing up as Mark Twain and a holodeck, both being Mark Twain. So they said just the same thing, Captain Freeman, and they make that alien dress as Mark Twain. And it doesn't work, though. He's like, roar, and gets all pissed off. And the captain's like, why would you think that would work? Which I'm still a bit upset about. I think it would have been more funny if it did work. They would just make it even more ridiculous and ludicrous. But anyway, that's Lower Decks. Again, total aside. Nothing to do with this episode. But anyway, I did have to make that joke. Picard should have dressed up as Mark Twain. Anyway. And the concept of Myzarians are really cool. For as far as I know, actually, I think I remember reading in Memory Alpha just now that one of them appeared in Lower Decks as well, that worked with or knew Mariner from a space station, whatever. I don't remember. It's the Dopplers episode, which I only saw that episode once. I didn't really like it all that much. It was okay. So I don't remember that at all. I'd have to go back and watch that again. But anyway, so I guess these aliens keep popping up again in Lower Decks. But anyway, other than that, as far as I know, the Myzarians only appear in the background. I remember seeing them in the background of several TNG episodes, and I was like, hey, it's those aliens from Allegiance. But they don't really explore them, really, at all, which is a shame because they're an interesting concept too. And here's an interesting question that I heard someone else pose, which is something interesting to ponder: is are most of the aliens stuck up and arrogant like this guy, or is it just this guy? I like to think that it's just this guy, that these aliens are more diverse, and it's not like a trait of their race for them to be such an arrogant prick. Or you're all stuck up and everything. It just happens to be that guy. Anyway, I even think what's-her-face, the cadet posing, the alien posing as the bullying cadet, even said at one stage that you're the least modest of your people. So I think, to me, that would indicate that it's his own personal trait. But anywho, So yeah, I love this storyline as well because this is another, like, season 3 is just so good at writing Picard. I think season 3 might be my favorite season for how they wrote Picard, if I'm being honest, because they wrote him as like the man, as he's just awesome and he just figures things out and he's like very smart and he can deduce everything. You got episodes like The Survivors where he still one of my favorites of season 3 and one of my favorite Picard episodes period of the entire show, where he's like figuring things out. There's a mystery and he's like narrowing it down. He's like 5 steps ahead of everyone else. And then you got Instance of Command, where he was the first one to see like this treaty, the loophole in the treaty where no one else could saw it, and he like totally screwed over the Shellyak by playing their own game and beating them over the head with the treaty, and he relished in doing that, which was a fucking awesome Picard moment. And you got a matter of perspective, where even though it was Geordi and Data and Wesley that actually figured the technical side out, he put it all together and pieced it together with what he was seeing in the trial, and he was able to solve the trial and prove Riker's innocence once for all. And then you have this episode where he was noticing the small details and watching and observing, and while the other people were sitting there pointing fingers, oh, you're the bad guy, no, you're the bad guy, no, you're the bad guy, like Picard wasn't bothering to do that. Instead, he was just observing them and waiting for them to mess up. And then the bullying cadet did mess up and mention Mataka 3, which, shout out to the episode Who Watches the Watchers, which again, I love the continuity there. They actually shout out, oh yes, you encountered the primitive race on Mataka 3. Who Watches the Watchers. And so Picard was like, oh, I doubt that a cadet would know about that mission, but it's not impossible. So he was forming a suspicion. I love the way Patrick Stewart played that too, because you had a really subtle look on his face, like, when she mentioned that Mataka 3. But it's not enough to prove anything, because even though it's unlikely a cadet would know about Mataka 3, it's not impossible. So he tested her and specifically named a mission that was classified that a cadet 100% would never know about. And she fell into the trap and was like, yes, that mission to the Stargazer. And like, yep, no. That's and she named what it was, making it clear she knew about it. And he was like, yep, no. And I like that even he doesn't call her out right then, even though he knows for a fact it's her. He does another sort of escape attempt, and I notice how he lets her be the one to go in the door, because I think he's testing her to see if she'll screw them over again, and she does, because this time when they open the door to find another door behind that door, and that's when Picard puts it all together and exposes them, which I think is a fucking awesome moment. And so part of, maybe the main reason why I like this episode as much as I do, as why I quoted it at the top of the video, because I think there was an awesome moment. They give us food that Isak can't eat. Like, it was an amazing moment, and I thought it was him being a badass. Now, then they get back to the ship. And he does have another moment being a badass. But this one I don't buy as much, because he's like, with a single look, I was able to communicate to my crew that I wanted you to be imprisoned. Really? I don't know. I don't buy that. Like, they have to already know that, I don't know. I don't buy that Riker would know that just from Picard, like, giving him this look that he would. Now, Riker is able to, like, punch in the thing so he can, like, send in written messages to Data and Worf or whatever. But they still show Data going, like looking and Worf looking, but they can actually sort of like write to each other at that stage. So I find that believability, and especially the whole point, because the aliens are talking about your primitive communication system or whatever, and it was it's not so primitive after all, because I was able to just shoot them a look. I don't buy that you would be able to just shoot them a look. How would Riker know exactly? I love the look that Riker gives to Picard as well in return. He's like, it's like so obvious, and it's dumb of the aliens to not pick up on it. But it was good. It was good. And goddamn, what kind of hypocrites are these aliens, thinking there's nothing wrong with abducting these 3 different people, and yet they're like so freaking out, hyper focused, and like hitting the force field just from being held there for like 5 seconds. But I like it. I like it. I think it's, I mean, yeah, that makes it more despicable that, why would you do this to us? So I'm like, dude, you just captured these people and held them there for like many days. Like that one dude you had there for 12 days. And how dare you, like, what a freaking hypocrite. But yeah, I'd buy that there'd be people out there. In fact, this would be a commentary on humanity in modern day that captures animals and uses them for experiments and fucks with them just to learn more. So yeah, I totally buy it, and I love how Picard gets the better of them. It was very, very satisfying. But I do wonder whatever happened to Isak and that other Myzarian dude once. I suppose, like, they would just drop them back off their home planet and leave because they would have no further use of them. That's my assumption. I'm sure Isak would try to kill those aliens, but they would probably just beam out of there or whatever and be like, all right, screw this shit. But yeah, that's something that I always wondered. Now, the episode then ends with Beverly coming on the bridge, and, you know, Picard's like, oh, doctor? And she's like, Captain. And, like, gives him this googly eyes, and he's like, what's going on here? Engage. Now, I heard several people criticize this ending. Someone incorrectly said that they used the same musical cues as season 1, which is absolutely incorrect. No. Sorry. Absolutely not. And I listened to this to make absolutely sure, even before I heard them make this accusation, I wanted to make sure it was a unique season 3 musical cue. It sounded nothing like the bullshit that they used to use in season 1 and 2, where they go, it would have that sort of comedic ending at the end, and they go, da 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 da. I fucking hated that. And granted, the musical cue they do use in this episode is sort of lighthearted and is meant to be that sort of comedic thing at the end. But it's nowhere near as bad as the ones they used in season 1 and 2. I'm sorry, it was not. And also, I've heard this compared to the original series endings, how they always had to end with a stupid joke when they go, ha ha ha, Mr. Spock, you're actually emotional, I'm insulted, or whatever bullshit jokes they would. I hated those. And I also take issue with people comparing it to that. It was nowhere near as bad as that. It was a little bit silly, to be fair, but I don't think it was anywhere near as bad as that bullshit they would do in the original series. And also, I was okay with it. I didn't mind. I thought it was actually kind of funny. Now, I don't know, like, I heard someone say, oh, of course Crusher would know that wasn't really Captain Picard. I'm like, how would she know? She wasn't on the bridge when it was revealed that it was an alien. As far as she knew, it wasn't an alien. I heard someone say, oh, she would be an idiot to not know. Like, how? She wasn't there. Maybe they just didn't have a chance to tell her yet. And maybe they will. And maybe she did know that this was the real Picard and the other was a fake Picard, and she was kind of just fucking with him. I would buy that. She was like, Captain, sort of hinting at that something went on while he was away. But I think, yeah, so that's kind of my headcanon, because I heard it asked, did she actually think that he had the hots for her at this stage, or was she just messing with him? I think she was just messing with him. That's my clear headcanon in this situation. And yeah, I mean, it was done for comedic effect, so you weren't supposed to overthink it, is the real answer. But in the universe, yeah, that's what I'm going to say, is that... yeah, she was messing with him, and I'm perfectly happy with that. So anyway, I'd now like to thank my Patreon supporters for supporting me on Patreon. It's very much appreciated. It does help me continue with the channel. It does inspire me to keep going, and I'm very humbled, very thankful for your support. So I'll give a quick shout out to Tetsen, Greg Marley, Francisco, Chuck Hooks, Kyrie091, Anthony D. Benedictus, Ricky Manijester, Joel Lavals, Alessandro Miguelesio, Norman Buckwald, Stephen Kennedy, Brenton Berg, Allison Fordyce, and Brandon Neal House. Thank you all so very much for your support. So we do have a couple of Patreon comments. All right, first comment is from Kyrie091, who says, Come cheer up, my lads, 'tis to glory we stare, to add something new to this wonderful year. To honor we call you as free men, not slaves, for who are so free as the sons of the waves. Heart of oak, heart of ships, jolly tars are our men's. We're always at the ready, steady boys, steady. We'll fight and we'll conquer again and again. Alright, I had to sing that. I saw that comment there, and I'm like, I can't just say this in the normal voice. I need to actually sing it. Which I didn't know the lyrics to that song before. The only one I recognized from actually watching the episode was, We're always at the ready, steady boys, steady. That's something I always remembered from this episode. Anyway, thank you, Kyrie091, for making me sing. Anyway, next comment is from Stephen Kennedy. He says, we get two versions of Picard in this episode. This is the Picard that will remain for the rest of the show. He was great in season 3, except for the episode The Hunted. We get the Mirror Universe version of Picard also, who only wants to sing and to score with Beverly. A good episode, but nothing special. My rating is 6 sing-alongs out of 10. Yeah, this is a good Picard. Season 3 was a good Picard. I don't know who that crank was in seasons 1 and 2. Screw that guy. Anyway, next comment is from Norman Buckwald, who says, Allegiance does not get the praise it should, as it followed the big 3, Yesterday's Enterprise, The Offspring, and Sins of the Father. So it's too bad. What isn't recognizable and should be praised is Stewart's acting, both as Picard, who figured out what was going on, but also who always cleverly bides his time, and of course as the imposter Picard. In both roles he is brilliant. Only sort of minus is Crusher coming on the bridge flirtatiously, flirtatiously at the end, and I suspect she's in on what's been happening, granted, but still. Which gives the trumpet wah wah at the end sigh. I give it 9 red discs out of 10. They give us food that Issa can't eat. I've heard, as I said, I didn't really have as big of an issue with the Beverly coming on the bridge, but it was a bit silly, kind of low-hanging fruit. But anyway, last comment is from Brandon Neal House, who says, I like this episode. It is vastly underrated, but every word before the word but is horseshit. That's a Game of Thrones quote, if you don't know that. Why is there no water and no amenities for captives? 2 people from Starfleet does give the game away. Like Lonely Among Us, I have no idea what fake Picard was going to do once he reached the pulsar. No wonder the aliens can't bear captivity. If I had to wear a rubber suit like that, I'd want to disappear too. 6 Esox knives out of 10. Yeah, I can always trust on Brandon to comment on bad costuming. That's very reliable. Yeah, I've heard it mentioned before that where the bathrooms, but you could make that argument for the entire show for the ship. We never see the bathrooms on the Enterprise. You just gotta assume they're there, and I think that's the same thing with this episode. Maybe there's this hidden door in the corner. I don't really care. I mean, that is a logical issue, but yeah. But anyway, you do bring up a good point that I wanted to mention. I forgot to mention that's Lonely Among Us. And I think I talked about this when I did my review for Lonely Among Us, which is a terrible episode, by the way. I think I have that in my top 10 worst episodes of TNG. Because I brought up Allegiance in that episode as well, because that episode did a very piss poor job of, the captain's acting weird, we need to relieve him of duty. And it was very similar what they did in this episode as well, but they did a much better job at it. Because in that episode, Lonely Among Us, they were like, when clearly Picard was like admitted to being possessed by an alien, they still let him stay in command, and Beverly waited way too long to relieve him of duty. And they're like, and then Picard actually tries this same trick, or fake Picard, I should say, tries the same trick in this episode that he tried in Lonely Among Us, where when Riker went to him and was like, I might relieve you of duty, he's like, maybe it's you who needs to be relieved of duty. He did the whole, I know you are, but what am I thing, which in Lonely Among Us actually worked, which was bullshit, and I called out that bullshit. Now Picard, or fake Picard, did try that in this episode too, but it didn't work, which is why it was great. Why Riker wasn't buying that bullshit. He wasn't going to let fake Picard relieve him of duty. Which is interesting, because I thought he was going to force Riker to leave the bridge immediately, but apparently he didn't. Apparently he gave the order to send the Enterprise to its doom while Riker was still there. I wonder if he had sent Riker away, if he would have gone, and if Worf would have made him go, which I doubt he would have. I don't know. So they actually stood up to Picard better in this episode and didn't let him do this whole I know you are, but what am I bullshit that he did in Lonely Among Us. And goddamn, that episode sucked. This episode just handled the situation so much better, just so much better than that episode. Anyway, thank you, patrons, for your comments. So my rating for Allegiance out of 10 is going to be an 8. Extremely good. Now, I'm tempted to give this episode a 9, but I don't think it quite gets to a 9 for me, but it's a very strong 8. It is a strong 8. I think this is a really good episode. I agree that it's underrated. It is a bit simple, which is maybe why I don't push it all the way to a 9. It's like I wouldn't put it with the greats of TNG, but it's definitely a really strong episode. It's a really enjoyable episode, a really tight episode. I'm surprised that I think it is definitely underrated. I'm surprised so many people are down on it or think it's kind of just mediocre or whatever, or annoying or whatever, because I love the Picard singing always at the ready, and it was fun, it was interesting, and it was great, getting the Picard being a badass, figuring it out and they give us food that Isa can't eat. I don't think it's as good as the Survivors. I think that is a much better episode, to be fair, but because there's more emotional involved in Survivors, where here was sort of more of just lighthearted, and it was just a bunch of stupid aliens being dicks, but it was still good. It was still interesting, and Patrick, as Norman pointed out, Patrick Stewart did a great acting job playing the different versions of Picard, and unwinding the sort of mystery as they go. I think this is a very solid episode that doesn't get as much praise as it deserves. So that is it for my review of Allegiance. So coming up next on my channel, if I'll just bring that up here, this coming Saturday I'll be releasing my review for Captain's Holiday. And then on Monday I'm doing something weird, something different, covering a topic that is not movies or television. It's music, something I never cover on my channel, and music unrelated to movies. I'm doing my top 5 favorite albums of all time, because this is a video I've been wanting to do for like a year, and I'm finally getting around to doing it because screw it, I want to do it. Anyone interested in my channel, interested in my musical taste, can watch. Otherwise, you can skip it. Anyway, and on Wednesday I'll be back to TNG, releasing a review for Tin Man, and then on Thursday another new review for TNG with Hollow Pursuits. So that's what's coming up on my channel. Be sure to check out my channel for many more Star Trek reviews and many more reviews on many other shows as well. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.